Hey, this is Gina Versa with the Waffle Press Podcast. I'm joined by our frequent contributor,
Chris Morgutia, loud and clear.
And we are doing a special episode where we're interviewing a guest, Mr. Jody Schaeffer, co-creator of Megas XLR. And
hi, how you doing?
Yeah, good to have you on, good sir.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here.
Everything going okay? How you doing?
Yeah, so far so good.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining us, Jody. I really appreciate you taking your time and talking with us, and we'll go over some cool questions because me and Chris are really big fans of the show. So
right on.
So
nice to see we had an impact.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. I guess I'll kick this off. So our first question is, what inspired you to get into art and animation? Like, what were some big influences in cartoons that you were a big fan of growing up?
Oh, I was always, I always enjoyed drawing as a kid, and I knew as I was growing up I was either going to get into comic books or animation. And when I started going to school, I ran into Chris Barnowski and George Christic, and Chris was going the animation route, and that kind of settled that. It just seemed like the most fulfilling route to go. And I mean, growing up, I watched Battle of the Planets and Star Blazers and Transformers, and those all, featured, they all had a tremendous influence on my personal taste and what I wanted to see in a cartoon. So.
Yeah, no, those are some nice influences and really cool cartoons to be inspired by.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, very cool. So Jody, the series is both a homage and parody of mecha anime. What are some of the anime series, just to reiterate, you watched and were inspired by? I just got into Evangelion, so
Evangelion was actually one of the big ones. I was going to mention also, like, Gundam, obviously, and several a lot of the standard giant robot anime. But I mean, one of the things that actually spurred us to make, with the premise was because when we watched those shows, the pilots were always very, we're suffering from tremendous angst about having to drive these giant robots. And George and I were like, if it was us or any of our friends, we wouldn't care about the stakes that were, we would just be thrilled that we get to drive the giant robot. So, like, oh, the Earth's going to blow up? Well, who cares? I get to drive the giant robot.
Yeah, that's the dream.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So yeah, that was that.
Yeah. So the pilot episode, it was shown as part of the cartoon show, and that was, I remember that was like this large like contest that they would do for like shorts. And was there any pressure in entering that competition that you felt, or anything that you could talk about?
No, not really. When we pitched the initial concept to Linda Semensky, who was the VP at the time, I think we literally just sandbagged her at Comic-Con one year because she was, she had taught some classes for me, and she remembered me back from college. So when we had this idea, I literally just let her know I was going to be there and just basically pounced on her and gave her the thing, and she watched it. She's like, "This is hilarious. I want to check this out." And the cartoon show was a contest. Like they would show all these different cartoon shorts and let the audience vote on which one they think they would like to get into a series. That's how we got like Codename Kids Next Door. There's another one I can think of. And we aired ours, and it literally just blew all the others out of the water. So that was very reassuring. They didn't really know how to handle us though, because we were a little bit of a deconstruction. Like literally had the Adult Swim came out like a year or two after we had been in production, and if it had been an entity when we were pitching it, that's almost certainly where we would have gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're right about that, because I think Adult Swim came out in 2001, but at the time they were just picking up other shows that were canceled by other networks. So yeah, I guess it was a matter of timing.
Yep. I mean, Venture Brothers was one of the first ones there. And real talk, that's one of that show I think is in the same vein as what we were doing. You know, like it's an homage and it's like a parody of the action cartoons of the 60s and 70s, and then it's basically what we were doing too, but with giant robots.
Yeah. I'm a giant Venture Brothers stan, so I'll definitely agree with you there.
Oh yeah, that's a great show.
Yeah.
So the series I believe got picked up won the competition in 2002 and was supposed to launch in December 2003. But was there any reason for the delay from 2003 to 2004? And was there any reason for the name change from Lowbrow to Megas XLR?
A couple of things there. Yes. Actually, we were supposed to be greenlit in 2001, but just as we were on the track to getting greenlit, September 11th happened. So that pushed everything back by months and months. And then it got delayed. Just standard operating, production holdups just kept us having to punt the broadcast date down the line till we eventually hit ours. But the reason we did have to change our name from Lowbrow to Megas XLR, and it was specifically because we couldn't get the rights to lowbrow.com.
Oh.
Yeah. They were very big on their proprietary websites. Like that. Yeah. That's when it was first starting to blow up, and they were very big on that. Like we can't have kids going to like type in lowbrow and have something else come up.
So, I could only imagine what the original domain was for.
It was just this, as I recall, it was just weird little like beatnik poems and things, but there were sometimes some fairly adult themes, as I recall, and that was one of the reasons why they were like, okay, we're not gonna let the kids go to this. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I remember Vegas had some really cool web games as well.
Actually, that was Lisa Jones. She's producer over at Titmouse now. She's working on Bless the Hearts for Fox. She was actually one of the ones, like we collaborated with her, but she led the charge for the internet presence. And at the time, basically, like Cartoon Network, they knew, the internet was an important thing, but they didn't, they didn't have a particularly big presence. But our website, because we threw in all those little Easter eggs and video games and stuff, it blew up for them. It turned into this big thing, and they started to see how much potential there was online for that sort of interactive content.
Yeah.
And then you can't get any of those games anymore either, I think.
I don't think so, yeah.
Cartoon Network closed down the server.
They don't like to have the old shows for they don't like to have the games for shows they don't support anymore. You sheep in the big city game up there, sort of like that.
That was great. So just changing gears, kind of going with the topic, car culture plays such a big part in Megas XLR. And I'm really curious what your dream car was growing up. Did you ever get to own it, or are you still looking for that dream car to buy?
I mean, honestly, I live in the middle of Los Angeles. A car is just a conveyance. I love, but when I was growing up, I loved Mopar, and Plymouth, and that kind of thing. That's why we based Coop's car off of the CUDA, and also one of the other reasons why we wanted a very distinctive hood, and we knew we wanted a blower of some kind, but we couldn't have it interfering with the staging, because we were often looking through the front windshield. That was how the show was storyboarded. So okay, well this is a kick-ass car, one of my favorites, and it has this very distinctive, very low blower. So we went with that, and we actually approached the Plymouth to get the rights to the CUDA, just so we could say, hey, it's this car. But Cartoon Network, I can't remember if it was Cartoon Network or if it was the Plymouth themselves, but it didn't work out. So we're like, okay, well we got to change the car up. So we altered the front of we altered the grill, and instead of a Cuda, we called it a Kuma after the bear in the fighting game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a great card. It has a great build. I think mine was probably the IROC Z for Dream
Oh, right on.
Cars. Yeah.
Mine was a little bit more unrealistic. It was a DMC 12 DeLorean because I was a huge Back to the Future fan. Still am.
Nice.
I mean, if I get in a place where I can, where auto collecting is a thing that I can do, I would almost certainly want to go for a Cuda, the Hemi Cuda.
Yeah.
Like you looked at bright red Hemi Cuda. Yeah, that's with the convertible. Yeah, that's check and check. Yes, please.
Definitely. So working with Cartoon Network at the time, how was that like? For our generation, mine and Chris, our generation, the mid 2000s was certainly an interesting era for the network, and just from just reading some articles, it seemed like there was some shakeups, things like that. What can you tell us about working in that era?
It was great. It was still it was a very loose and creative time to be at Cartoon Network. They gave us a lot of freedom, which is one of the reasons why we delivered late. But it was, I don't know how to describe that other than it was a great experience. I really did Cartoon Network. And I would go back. Just as the way my career has panned out, I have not had any opportunity to be there. But there's no ill will on any side as far as I know. And Cartoon Network is still one of the networks that I watch more than just about anything. And,
Same here.
Same.
Yeah.
I know a year or two after Megas XLR got canceled, they canceled a bunch of other shows too, and that became the dark era of the so-called dark era Cartoon Network when they started trying to push the live action stuff to compete with Nickelodeon and Disney, and that didn't pan out.
Yeah.
That didn't pan out at all. That was not a good idea on any level.
I will say, Bobby Says, I don't know who thought that was a good idea.
I only like Destroy, Build, Destroy.
Destroy, Build, Destroy.
Andrew WK was made for TV.
Andrew WK is an adorable man, and yes, that was the one I also was. I didn't like watching any of those live actions. I was like, Andrew WK, yes, you are a sweet and precious baby. You get a pass.
Yes. All right. So this one's kind of a loaded question. So just talk about the design of the main characters. You did mention at ToonCon that Coop and his facial expressions were partially based on Chris Farley. And, it's really appreciated that the main character was a heavy set guy, so anyone can just identify with them or cosplay him at cons. And by any chance, were Coop, Jamie, Kiva, and Goat based off anyone you or George Christic knew in real life?
I mean, Coop is an amalgam of several folks we knew, like Tony Cupo, my buddy Lance, just several, Chris Farley. We just like those big, jolly, kind of goofy dudes. Like I said, when I first, the idea was George and I, we were at my house back in New Jersey and playing video games, and we just bounced ideas back and forth. And I told George, I was like, I've boiled down what I want to see in a TV show down to a single sentence, George, and I want to see a big fat screaming idiot driving a giant robot. And that's literally how we went from there. We've just always enjoyed that kind of silly physical humor, and we expanded from there. But yes, as far as Kiva is just sort of an amalgam of various anime action girls. Like she was almost more of an archetype than anything. Jamie was kind of in sort of way, he was sort of the creator insert there, like if he was the one just kind of being snarky, and that we kind of viewed through our lens, because George and I were like, we wouldn't be driving the giant robot, we'd be the asshole sitting next to him having making smart ass comments. So that's why he was there. But Goat is actually a real person. We went to school with him. He's a good friend of ours, and we at the time loved just putting him into cartoons as a character. Like he even did the voice for the character. So
nice.
So if you wonder how we got a character that skeevy into a children's cartoon, that's how.
Yeah, so that kind of goes into the next question. How involved were you in selecting the voice cast? Did you go to through like someone higher up at Cartoon Network to go with these specific people, or did you?
We had
Mhm.
that's a good question. We actually had some folks in mind. Like we didn't have one. We actually did some auditions through there. We eventually, we came to the what's Peter DeLuise? Yeah, one of the DeLuise boys. So that was fine. And he had a great voice, and we dug that. But uh, Jamie and Kiva, we knew we actually wanted to get Wendy Lee and Steve Bloom from Cowboy Bebop. And initially they were like, "Oh, Judy, Jamie's a kind of a slight dude. Is that listen to Steve Bloom? The man he's got an amazing voice. It's very deep. It's like, is he going to be able to do that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've listened to him. He has the range." They were like, "Well, what about Dave Foley or that sort of thing?" No, we really want Steve Bloom. Let's get him in to do this. And he came in and he nailed it. And I was like, we knew he would, and because he had the range. That was his first Western cartoon. Again, that's when he really started to blow up. Was before then he was just doing voiceovers for anime. Like,
Yeah,
this guy has, he and Wendy. They're like, these two are way too talented to just be doing dubs. They should be doing their own characters. So that kind of blew up for them. And Steve, we still talk to both of them. They're fantastic people, and yeah.
yeah. I mean, he has such a great range too. I love him on like Rebels as Zeb. He's just like Calabash and his like Cockney accent.
Yep. I even think he did Yankee Doodle in Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law.
Yeah,
Yeah, my familiarity with him was voicing Tom from the host of Toonami, and I
Yep.
did catch him in a couple regular shows episode later on. It's funny that you mentioned David DeLuise, who was the voice of Coop. I ended up finding out just recently that. Oh.
Peter was the 21 Jump Street guy. That's right. I couldn't remember which Eloise it was. Dom had a lot of.
Yeah, I actually found out that he was the dad in Wizards of Waverly Place on Disney Channel.
Yep.
So that was like something my sister grew up watching a lot, and I would just walk by a lot.
And if you look, I mean, you see, like he's much thinner than Coop, but there was definitely some of him in the design as well.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. But like I said, Steve Blue, when he came in, they were like, he's got a really deep voice. I was like, well, let him go. And then he came in with this higher pitched, younger sounding voice, and they were like, wow. So, and Wendy, that's just her voice, and she nails it every time.
Okay, I guess our next question is, and you can go on about this one as long as you want. Are there any episodes, moments, lines, or jokes that come to mind as favorites from the show?
I always liked the button gags that we would do. My literal favorite one is when Coop, because this was I loved the kid, like maybe you'll like this better than, and he goes and pushes the button that says this better than.
Yes.
It was just so, yeah, we just hang lampshades on that stuff, and it was just so stupidly, ridiculously funny. That's exactly my brand of humor. So yeah.
That's a great gag.
Oh, definitely. That's timeless.
We loved when we got to hang a lampshade on anything that like any network notes or any of the rules. They were like, make sure that when you're smashing these buildings, make sure they come across as being empty, and that's where a lot of those snarky signs came from. And we were happy about that because it let us plus the humor. It's like this. They'd crash into a building and there'd be a big sign on there saying this building's scheduled for demolition anyway, or conveniently uninhabited building.
Cool. Talking more about Megas XLR. After it wrapped, how do you feel like it influenced any projects you worked on afterwards in terms of like characterization, action, or humor, or just your own style, if it changed or anything?
No, it's still pretty much in my wheelhouse. I mean, Chris Parnowski afterwards, he went on to do Motor City because he is really into car culture. In fact, he's the one that hit Meg the robot. It was actually based on one of Chris's original designs. I designed the characters, but the robot, even though we had Edward Artinian as our main robot guy in the actual production, while we were in the development stage, Chris had the idea of putting the car for the head for the robot, and because we were coming at it from the video game angle, like this nerd who knows how to play video games, and that's why he can pilot the robot. But Chris was like, well, why don't we make it a car too? Because that's a cool badass. And we're like, that's a great idea, and it looked really cool, and we ran with it.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah.
We ran into Chris P at your panel. He was great. He drew us some really cool sketches as well.
Crazy talented dude.
Yeah. Are there any so we know that due to Cartoon Network writing it off as a loss, the show, unfortunately, it can't be revived as of now. Are there any concept you would have brought to a revival, and what series that got revived? So say Samurai Jack or...
Actually, we talked about that. You can't never say never. We'll see if anything comes, because they have been... Megas still airs in South America and their other markets, and it is still making them money. So it's probably making the money at this point, even though it's all the losses did get written off onto it. It's probably pretty close to at least breaking even, which when that happens, who knows what the future holds. But if we were going to do a revival at this point, we would probably go for an Adult Swim style, because we have talked about that a lot. Go figure. But the Adult Swim style, probably if not a full reboot, maybe at least since the original show was 15 years ago, we were put it on Adult Swim and have it just take place 15 years in the future from there. What Coop hasn't developed at all. He's a dude in his late 30s living in his mom's basement. It's so except for driving the robot, he's actually pretty pathetic.
I'd buy into
I'd do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually did a really quick Google search, and I was surprised to see there was people in the Philippines selling drink toppers that they gave out as part of kids at Jollibee's.
Yep, Jollibee was the only franchise that picked up our merchandising options. Real talk, that was one of the reasons why at the time, one of the reasons we did get canceled was because they also had the original Teen Titans and Ben 10 were going out, and those were three properties that were all competing for the same audience. And although we were, our ratings were on par with theirs, that was something people don't realize. So we were actually a really popular show, go figure. But they were Teen Titans, and Ben 10 was Sam Register's baby, and I said, well, and at that point, Linda Semensky, who was our executive, she had moved on to PBS, so we didn't really have anybody in the upper echelons to fight for us, and that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. All right, so we come back 14 years later after the series ran its course, and in the series OKKO Let's Be Heroes, there was an episode Crossover Nexus that aired a year ago in 2018, and it was a tribute to a lot of the past Cartoon Network shows. And Kiva's seen very briefly as a stone statue, as a victim of the villain that brought all these characters into that universe. And were you aware that Kiva was in that? And were you surprised that included her?
I was. It was a surprise, and it was a pleasant surprise. Animation's a pretty small industry, so we know a lot of those guys. Some of those folks worked on our show, and or we're just friends with them, and they know us, so hey, this is something they probably get a kick out of, so they put her in there, and that just felt good to see that we weren't completely forgotten by by primary Cartoon Network brass.
Yeah, another note to that was I read into that a bit more, and there were a few cartoons that aired after Megas XLR ran its course, and they were supposed to be represented, but they got cut for runtime. So,
yep.
Surprise.
Again, there isn't any malice in it. That's just the way that's just the nature of production.
Yeah, sadly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is what it is.
Yeah.
All right, and I guess that takes us to our last question. Is there anything you've worked on since Megas XLR or are working on right now that you would like to share, let people know about?
Currently, I'm actually working on it's called The Great North, and it stars Nick Offerman and here, let me find some more about it. But it's going to be on Fox after Bob's Burgers, and it's going to be airing like towards the end of next year.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's see who else.
Yeah, I think we're both we're both huge Nick Offerman fans and Bob's Burgers fans, so we're definitely going to be looking forward to it.
Love me some.
Oh yeah, it's the Bob's Burgers writers writing, Ron Swanson. It's a slam dunk. Like it's I obviously I can't violate any NDA, but I can say, usually a TV show takes a few episodes to kind of develop, and grow the beard just to figure out the format. But again, the Bob's Burgers writers, they know what they're doing, and they already knew the character. Like Nick Offerman, he brings Ron Swanson, and it's amazing. So like, okay, let's, they knew exactly who it was. They didn't have to worry about, like learning his character over the first few episodes. And again, and because everybody knows who Nick Offerman is, they didn't have to worry about explaining it to the audience either. So they were able to hit the ground running. So
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to that one coming out next year.
Oh, definitely. That seems like really interesting. It's yeah. I mean, he's not like season 1 era of The Simpsons where Homer is just like Walter Matthau.
Frosty chocolate milkshake.
Oh. Yeah. Still trying to find the voice.
They still call that out, which is funny. I don't really like, nobody really watches them anymore, but they still show up, and they did a voice recognition gag with him, and but the recording was made in like the late 80s, so he did it was pretty funny.
Yeah, it's a great gag. But Jody, just wrapping up, where can listeners find you in terms of social media to follow you after this episode?
I have a small. I have a small Twitter presence, but I'm not really around. Like if I start self-promoting and something again, which I do have some stuff in development, but I don't want to. You can't talk about it because you'll jinx it. But if I do have something like that, like you'll be able to find me on Twitter. Just Jody Schaeffer at Twitter, and that's really it for now.
Okay. No,
yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Always. Yeah. Trying to ask. But no, I guess that wraps up the interview. Jody, just wanted to say thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. It was a blast talking to you.
A huge pleasure, yes.
Glad to be here. Thank you, guys. It was a lot of fun to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And hope to have you back on. Who knows? But Jody, thank you so much. I guess this wraps up the episode. As always, we end with Chris. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Machapon_. Not as active lately, but just trying to clean up my act a little here and there.
Mm-hmm. And you can follow.
I know.
Yeah. Follow the Waffle Press at the Waffle Press. Subscribe, iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. Thank you for listening. Thanks for watching. We've been Professionally Unprofessional.